I'm Sloane Jacobs, 25, female. I live in a downtown loft that's mostly glass and steel, a place that always feels like it's humming with the city's energy. I'm the co-founder and lead developer of a small but successful tech startup, a company I built from the ground up with my business partner, David. The problem is, David is also my brother-in-law, which makes our lives a complicated, intertwined mess. I used to think that was a strength, a sign of a family so close we could build a dream together. That illusion, like so much else in my life, was about to be shattered by a single, 7-word text message. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The air in my sister Emily's house was thick with the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon. Laughter echoed from the living room, a warm, genuine sound that felt like the definition of home. This was our Thanksgiving tradition, a loud, chaotic, and loving gathering that served as the anchor for our busy lives. I was sitting on the plush living room rug, leaning against the sofa while my 7-year-old nephew Leo showed me the starship he'd built out of interlocking blocks. His face was a mask of intense concentration, his small hands carefully maneuvering the plastic pieces, and this part, Aunt Sloane, he said, pointing with a chubby finger, is the hyperdrive. It makes it go faster than light. Wow, Leo, that's some serious engineering, I said, smiling. Maybe you can come work at my company someday. Across the room, my sister Emily, a pediatric nurse with a heart as warm as her smile, was placing a pumpkin pie on the dessert table. She caught my eye and winked. Her life was so different from mine, filled with scraped knees, bedtime stories, and the steady rhythm of a hospital schedule. Mine was a whirlwind of code, investor meetings, and the relentless pressure to innovate. Yet here we were just sisters. Her husband, David, stood by the fireplace, a glass of red wine in his hand, captivating our uncle with a story about a recent business trip. At 30, David was everything you'd want in a business partner, charismatic, sharp, and ambitious. He handled the business side of our startup, Connect Sphere, while I led the technical team. We were the perfect duo. He was the face, I was the engine. He charmed the investors. I built the product that made their investment worthwhile. People always commented on how lucky we were to have such a seamless partnership, one built on the foundation of family trust. Looking at him then, so handsome and confident in his cashmere sweater, I felt a surge of pride. We had done it. 2 years of sleepless nights, ramen noodle dinners, and betting everything on an idea had paid off. We were successful. Our family was healthy and happy. Everything was exactly as it should be. The scene was a perfect photograph, a moment of flawless contentment. David raised his glass in my direction, a silent toast to our shared success. I smiled and nodded back, feeling a deep, uncomplicated sense of gratitude. The laughter, the warmth, the feeling of absolute security, it was all real, or so I believed. In that moment, nestled in the heart of my family, I felt untouchable. The world outside, with its sharp edges and hidden dangers, couldn't possibly reach me here. I helped Emily clear the dinner plates, our conversation light and easy, filled with jokes about our parents and plans for Christmas. David was now locked in a debate with my father about the stock market, his voice confident and authoritative. I remember thinking how perfect it all was. It was a life built on a foundation of love and trust, a fortress that felt impenetrable. The dangerous part about believing you live in a fortress is that you never, ever think to check the walls for cracks. You don't listen for the sound of the foundation crumbling from within. You just sit inside, enjoying the warmth, completely oblivious to the rot that's been spreading for months, just waiting for the right moment to bring the whole structure crashing down. That moment was only seconds away. We were just about to cut the pumpkin pie when my phone, which I'd left on the entryway table, buzzed. It was a single sharp vibration that cut through the warm hum of conversation. Normally, I would have ignored it. I had a strict no work at family gatherings a rule, but something about the abruptness of the sound made me uneasy. Making a quiet excuse, I slipped away from the group and walked into the hall. The screen was lit up with a notification from an unknown number. My brow furrowed. I didn't recognize it, and I rarely got messages from numbers I hadn't saved. I swiped the screen to unlock it, a flicker of mild curiosity being the only emotion I felt. Then I read the words, and the floor seemed to drop out from under me. Walk away immediately. Say nothing to anyone. 7 words, that was it. No name, no explanation. Just a cold, stark command. I read it again, and then a third time, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. My heart started to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, panicked rhythm that drowned out the happy sounds coming from the dining room. It felt like a prank, a cruel, bizarre joke, but an icy dread was already coiling in my stomach, a primal instinct screaming that this was real. I slowly lifted my head, my eyes scanning the people I loved most in the world. They were all there, laughing, talking, completely unaware of the bomb that had just detonated in my hands. My gaze landed on Emily, her face bright with joy as she described a funny patient story. Then to my parents, their faces soft with contentment. And finally to David. He was leaning against the doorframe, watching me. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. There was no concern in his expression, no curiosity. There was something else, something I couldn't place. A flicker of something cold and watchful before he turned away and seamlessly re-entered a conversation. Was it him? Was he in some kind of trouble? Or was I the one in trouble? The message wasn't a warning about a stranger. It was a warning about someone here. Say nothing to anyone. That meant the threat was in this house. The warmth of the room suddenly felt suffocating. The scent of pie was nauseating. The laughter grated on my raw nerves. Every smiling face was now a mask, every conversation a potential lie. Paranoia, swift and sharp, sank its teeth into me. I had to get out. My mind raced, searching for a plausible excuse. I couldn't just run out the door screaming. I walked back into the dining room, forcing my lips into a smile that felt like cracking porcelain. My hands were shaking. I shoved them into my pockets. "Hey, everyone," I said, my voice sounding strangely high-pitched. "So sorry, but that was a message from my lead server engineer. There's a critical failure in one of our main databases. I have to go, right now." A chorus of disappointed sounds filled the room. Emily rushed over, her face etched with concern. "Oh, Sloan, no, on Thanksgiving. Can it wait?" "No, Em, I'm so sorry. If the whole system goes down, we could lose millions in client data. I have to handle it myself." It was a good lie, believable for my line of work. David stepped forward, his expression a perfect blend of professional concern and brotherly sympathy. "Is it the Phoenix server? I can come with you. We can troubleshoot together." His offer sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. If he was the threat, his offer was a trap. If he wasn't, I'd be rejecting my partner's help during a crisis. The cryptic text echoed in my mind. "Say nothing." "No, it's fine," I said, a little too quickly. "It's a legacy code issue. You'd be bored to tears. I've got it. I'm so sorry, everyone." I didn't wait for more questions. I hugged Emily tightly, grabbed my coat and keys, and fled. I practically ran to my car, my keys fumbling in my trembling hand. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced back at the house, a perfect picture of holiday warmth against the dark night. Through the big bay window, I could see the silhouette of my family. One of them had betrayed me. And someone else knew. The drive home was a blur of traffic lights and blind panic, my mind replaying those 7 words over and over again, each one a hammer blow against the life I thought I knew. The sterile silence of my loft was a stark contrast to the warmth I'd just left. I paced the polished concrete floor, my phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline. An hour passed, then 2. My mind was a chaotic storm of possibilities. Was this a personal vendetta, a corporate attack? Was my family in danger? With every passing minute, the text felt less like a prank and more like a harbinger of doom. I'd reread the message so many times the words had started to lose their meaning. Just as I was about to throw my phone against the wall in frustration, it buzzed again, another text from the same unknown number. My breath hitched. This time it was a single word, Helios. My blood ran cold. Helios was not a random word. It was the internal code name for a top secret project at Connect Sphere. It was our next-gen initiative, a revolutionary predictive analytics algorithm I had personally been developing for the past 8 months. Only a handful of people even knew the name existed. Me, David, and 2 senior engineers who were bound by ironclad NDA. The sender wasn't an outsider. They were inside my company. This wasn't just a threat. It was a betrayal from within my inner circle. My fingers, shaking, typed out a reply. "Who is this?" The response was almost immediate. "Someone who believes in what this company was supposed to stand for. Check the server logs for Helios. Look for unauthorized access from an external IP routed through a proxy in Eastern Europe. The timestamp is 3:15 a.m. last Tuesday." A new message followed before I could respond. My name is Chris. I'm a data analyst. I found something I wasn't supposed to. We need to talk, not on the phone, not on company email. Meet me tomorrow, 8 a.m., the coffee shop on Elm Street. Come alone. Chris. I vaguely recalled a quiet, bright kid from the analytics team. He was young, maybe 24, and had only been with us for 6 months. I never would have picked him as the sender of a cryptic, life-altering message. My mind was reeling. David had to be involved. He was the only other person with full administrative access to the Helios project files. The 2 senior engineers were my loyal protégés. I trusted them implicitly. But David, he managed our server contracts, our security protocols. He could have created a backdoor. The rest of the night was a sleepless, paranoid blur. The next morning, I walked into the quiet coffee shop on Elm Street, feeling like a spy in a cheap movie. Chris was already there, tucked into a corner booth, hunched over a laptop. He looked even younger and more terrified in person. "Sloan," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "thanks for coming." "Chris, what is this? You need to tell me everything," I said, sliding into the booth. My voice was low and urgent. He took a deep breath and turned his laptop towards me. I was running a new diagnostic script I wrote to check for data redundancy and server inefficiencies. The script flagged a hidden partition on our main cloud server. It was cloaked to look like a system backup, but the file size was wrong. I got curious, so I dug into it. On the screen was a series of file directories that looked like gibberish. "It's encrypted," he explained, "but I found a vulnerability in the partition security protocol. Inside was a nightmare." He clicked open a file. It was a secondary set of code, a mirror of my Helios algorithm, but this version had been subtly altered. It contained a script, a backdoor that would allow someone to siphon data. Our proprietary source code, our client lists, our financial projections, continuously and undetectably to an external server. The IP address he'd texted me about was the destination. "This is corporate espionage." I breathed, horrified. "It's worse," Chris said, his face pale. He opened another folder. It was full of emails. Encrypted emails between David and the CEO of our biggest competitor, a corporate giant called Future Vision. My stomach dropped. I scrolled through the messages, my horror mounting with every line I read. They were negotiating the sale of my life's work. David's plan was laid out in cold, calculating detail. He was going to leak the Helios algorithm to Future Vision for a payout of $50 million. The leak would be disguised as a security breach, bankrupting Connect Sphere and destroying my reputation. He would walk away a rich man, leaving me with the ashes of the company I had poured my soul into. The final transfer was scheduled to happen in 2 weeks, right after the quarterly board meeting. The emails were clinical, but one line from David burned itself into my brain. "She'll be too busy dealing with the fallout to ever suspect a thing. By the time she figures it out, I'll be gone, and the company will be hers to bury." Sitting in that coffee shop, the world outside faded into a dull, muted roar. The betrayal was so immense, so absolute, that it felt physical, like a punch to the gut that had knocked all the air out of my lungs. David wasn't just my business partner, he was family. He was the man my sister loved, the uncle to my nephew. He had sat at our Thanksgiving table, smiling and laughing, knowing he was planning to systematically destroy my life. The grief was a tidal wave, but right behind it was something else, something cold and hard and sharp, rage. "He's not going to get away with this," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I looked at Chris, whose wide, fearful eyes reflected my own shock. "Chris, you took an incredible risk coming to me. Why?" He looked down at his hands. "My dad owned a small hardware store. When I was a kid, a big chain store moved into town and deliberately undercut his prices until he went bankrupt. They crushed him. What David is doing. It's the same thing, just with code instead of hammers and nails. It's wrong. What you built here is special. It deserved better." In that moment, I knew I had an ally, a real one. "Okay," I said, my mind already shifting from shock to strategy. "The emails and the code are damning, but a good lawyer could argue they were fabricated. David could say I planted them to frame him. We need more. We need undeniable, irrefutable proof. We need to follow the money." For the next week, Chris and I operated in the shadows of our own company. By day, I was the focused co-founder, going to meetings, reviewing code, and acting as if nothing was wrong. I had to interact with David, to sit across from him in the boardroom and pretend I didn't know he was a viper. Every pleasantry, every professional courtesy was an act of supreme self-control. It was emotional torture, but it was necessary to keep him from suspecting anything. By night, my loft became our war room. Chris, with his knack for finding needles in digital haystacks, proved to be a genius. We started with the shell company mentioned in the emails, a ghost corporation registered in the Cayman Islands named Helios Holdings. It was a brazenly arrogant move on David's part. Using the company's internal financial software, to which I had unrestricted access, I began a deep dive into David's expense reports and company credit card statements. On the surface, everything looked normal. But Chris had an idea. He wrote a script across. Reference vendor payments with newly registered domain names and IP addresses. We got a hit. $10,000 payment to a consulting firm in Delaware was processed 3 months ago. That firm was a ghost, but the IP address that had submitted the invoice was linked to a web service that specialized in creating anonymous corporate structures. That was how he'd set up Helios Holdings. The real breakthrough came from a business trip David had taken to Zurich 2 months prior. His expenses were all legit, airfare, a hotel, meals, but Chris managed to access the hotel's public Wi-Fi logs for the dates David was there. He found David's laptop signature connecting to the hotel network, and at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday, his laptop had also connected directly to the private network of a Swiss bank known for its secrecy and offshore account services. It was a tiny digital breadcrumb, something no one would ever look for, but we had it. We now had a clear chain of evidence. David created a shell corporation. He funded it through a bogus invoice from our company. He then used that corporation to open an untraceable bank account in Switzerland. This was where the $50 million payment from Future Vision was going to land. I stared at the flowchart we had drawn on my whiteboard, a complex web of deceit and greed. It was a masterpiece of betrayal. David had built a fortress of lies around himself, but we had found the secret passage in. We had the what, the how, and the why. We had the financial trail. Now, all we needed to do was let him walk straight into our trap. We couldn't just walk into the boardroom and present our findings. David was clever and manipulative. He would deny everything, paint me as a disgruntled partner, and use his charisma to charm the board. He would claim the evidence was circumstantial or fabricated. In the ensuing chaos, he could easily wipe the servers and destroy the proof, leaving us in a messy, she said, battle that would kill the company anyway. No, I needed to catch him in the act. I needed to let him complete the crime in a way that was public and undeniable. The stage for this final act would be the quarterly board meeting, just over a week away. David was scheduled to give the keynote presentation on the final implementation of the Helios project. It was the perfect opportunity. My plan was both simple and devious, born from the very skills David was trying to steal. We were going to build a Trojan horse. He's expecting to steal the final, polished version of the Helios source code. I explained to Chris in a hushed whisper over coffee, far from the office. We're going to give it to him. Chris looked at me, confused. I don't understand. Why would we just hand it over? We're not giving him the real code, I said, a grim smile on my face. We're giving him a special version. On the surface, it will look and function exactly like the real thing. It will pass any initial diagnostic he runs, but embedded deep within the code, we're going to plant a digital watermark, a unique encrypted signature that is provably linked to our company. In my developer credentials, it's like a digital fingerprint, but that was only part one. The second part was the trap itself. The file will also contain a silent execution script, I continued. The moment the file is transferred from our server to an external one, the script will trigger. It won't stop the transfer, it will encourage it. But it will do 3 things simultaneously. First, it will send an instant, encrypted alert to my personal devices with the exact time of the transfer. Second, it will perform a real-time trace and log the IP address of the sender, David, and more importantly, the IP address of the receiver, Future Vision's servers. Third, and this is the beautiful part, it will take a snapshot of the entire transaction, package it with the email logs and financial records we've already found, and upload it to a secure, anonymous cloud server that only I have the key to. It was a digital mousetrap. We would be baiting him with the cheese, and when he took it, the door would slam shut behind him, and all the evidence of his crime would be trapped for the authorities. The next few days were the most intense of my life. I practically lived in my apartment, coding the Trojan horse with a feverish intensity. I had to make it perfect, flawless. Any small bug could alert David that something was wrong. Chris, meanwhile, worked on creating a seamless way to swap my version of the code with the real one on the main server, a last-minute exchange that would happen just hours before the board meeting. He also set up the secure cloud server where the evidence package would be sent. The evening before the meeting, I did one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I called my sister, Emily. I didn't tell her what was happening, not yet. I couldn't bear to break her heart over the phone. I just told her that something big was happening at the company tomorrow, and that David's presentation was going to be a landmark moment for us. I told her I wanted her to be there to see it, to support her husband on his big day. She was so happy and proud, promising she'd be in the front row. It was a cruel, manipulative thing to do, but I needed her there. I needed the betrayal to be personal as well as professional. The world needed to see not just the partner he betrayed, but the family he was willing to sacrifice for money. The trap was set, all the pieces were in place, all that was left was for the show to begin. The boardroom at Connect Sphere was a showcase of our success. A long mahogany table, floor, to ceiling windows with a panoramic view of the city and estate, of the art presentation screen. That morning, the room felt less like an office and more like a courtroom. Our 5 board members, powerful investors who had bet millions on us, were seated around the table. At the back of the room, in a chair I had placed for her, sat my sister, Emily. She looked radiant, her eyes filled with pride for her husband. She gave me a warm, supportive smile as I took my seat. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. David stood at the head of the table, the picture of confidence. He was wearing a tailored suit, his smile easy and charming. He had no idea he was a dead man walking. He exchanged pleasantries with the board, his voice smooth and reassuring. He looked at me and gave a subtle nod, the kind of gesture we had shared 100 times before, a silent "we've got this." I felt nothing but a cold, hollow void. "Good morning, everyone," David began, his voice booming with authority. "Today marks a new chapter for Connect Sphere. For the past year, our team, under Sloan's brilliant technical leadership, has been developing a project that will not just disrupt the market. It will redefine it. I'm talking, of course, about Helios." He launched into his presentation, a slick performance filled with impressive charts and bold projections. He spoke of market penetration, user acquisition, and a future where Connect Sphere was the undisputed industry leader. He was selling a future he had no intention of letting the company see. As he talked, I kept my eyes on my smartwatch, which I had synced to our alert system. My heart was pounding a steady, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Any minute now, David moved to his final slide, and now, for the first time, I want to show you what Helios can really do. I am initiating the final upload of the core algorithm to our secure servers as we speak, marking its official launch. That was his cover story. The secure server was, in reality, the Future Vision server. He was doing it right here, right now, in front of everyone. He thought it was the most brilliant, audacious move, hiding his crime in plain sight. My wrist vibrated. A single, discreet message flashed on the screen of my watch. Transfer initiated. Package sent. The trap had sprung. I took a deep, steadying breath. David was wrapping up his speech, basking in the impressed looks from the board. "And so I see a future of unparalleled growth. Thank you. Any questions?" I stood up. "I have one," I said, my voice clear and cold, cutting through the polite applause. Every head in the room turned to me. David looked momentarily surprised, but his charming smile remained in place. "Of course, Sloan. What is it?" "My question is for the board," I said, my eyes not leaving his. "How much is our company's entire future worth? Because I know what David thinks it's worth. $50 million. The smile on David's face faltered. Confusion rippled through the room. "Sloan, what are you talking about? Have a seat." "I don't think so," I replied. I walked to the front of the room and plugged my own laptop into the presentation screen. You see, David's presentation, while impressive, left out a few key details. With a click, his presentation vanished, replaced by the contents of the evidence package. The first thing on the screen was the email chain between David and the CEO of Future Vision. Gasps echoed around the table. I saw Emily lean forward in her chair, her brow furrowed in confusion, as you can see. I said, my voice resonating with cold fury. David has been in negotiations to sell our proprietary Helios algorithm, the one he was just uploading, directly to our biggest competitor. David's face had turned ashen. This is insane. She's fabricated this. This is a character assassination. Is it David? I said, clicking to the next file. A map appeared on the screen, showing a live trace. This is the data transfer you initiated 60 seconds ago. As you can see, the data didn't go to our secure server. It went from your laptop right here to this IP address. I clicked again, and the IP address resolved to its owner, the corporate headquarters of Future Vision. The room was utterly silent. David was stammering, his confident facade completely shattered. "This is a technical glitch, a hack. And I suppose the Swiss bank account you opened under the shell corporation Helios Holdings was also a glitch." I put the financial records on the screen. The bogus invoice, the offshore bank transfers. It was all there, undeniable. I saved the final, most damning piece of evidence for last. "The code you just sent contained a digital watermark, uniquely identifying it as our intellectual property. It is, in essence, a digital fingerprint. By sending it, you created irrefutable proof of corporate espionage." I turned to look at Emily. Her face was a mask of utter devastation, her eyes wide with horror and disbelief. Tears were streaming down her face as she stared at her husband, the man she loved, who was now exposed as a thief and a liar. David looked from the board to me, and finally to his wife. The sight of her shattered expression seemed to be the final blow. He physically deflated, all the fight draining out of him. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The chairman of the board, a stern-faced man named Mr. Harrington, finally spoke, his voice like ice. "Security," he said into his phone. "We have a situation in the main boardroom. Please send someone up immediately." The aftermath was a storm of legal proceedings and emotional wreckage. David was fired on the spot, escorted out of the building by security. He was facing a litany of charges, from corporate espionage to wire fraud, brought by both Connect Sphere and, eventually, the federal government. His $50 million payday had turned into millions of dollars in legal fees and the very real possibility of a long prison sentence. He had lost everything: his career, his freedom, and his family. My relationship with Emily was the most significant casualty. For weeks, she wouldn't speak to me. She was caught in an impossible whirlwind of grief, anger, and humiliation. Part of her blamed me for the public nature of the confrontation, for not warning her, for destroying her life in front of my colleagues. I didn't blame her. I had made a calculated choice to sacrifice her comfort for undeniable justice, and that was a decision we would both have to live with. It took months of painful, tear-filled conversations for us to find our way back to each other. It started with her finally accepting the truth about the man she had married. She had found more evidence herself: secret credit cards, lies about his past, a whole life built on deceit. The brother-in-law I had betrayed me with was a man she discovered she never really knew at all. Our bond as sisters, though deeply scarred, was ultimately stronger than his lies. It was a new, more fragile relationship, one built on a shared trauma, but it was real. Connect Sphere survived. Our investors, impressed by my decisive action, rallied behind me. They saw that the company's soul, its innovation and integrity, was not in the man who sold its secrets, but in the woman who had built its foundations. I was named CEO. My first official act was to promote Chris to head of data security, giving him a significant pay raise and stock options. He had earned it. We spent the next year rebuilding. It wasn't just about recovering financially. It was about healing the company culture. The betrayal had left a deep wound. Trust was shattered, so I initiated a new era of radical transparency. We held open town hall meetings, made our financials clear to every employee, and established an anonymous ethics hotline. We were building a new company from the ashes of the old one where a secret like David's could never fester in the dark again. A year later, on Thanksgiving, the scene was very different. There was no big family gathering at Emily's house. Instead, it was a small, quiet dinner at my loft. It was just me, Emily, and my nephew, Leo. My parents had joined us earlier via video call. The grand, perfect facade of the previous year was gone, replaced by something quieter, more honest, and infinitely stronger. As Emily and I cooked together, our conversation was soft and real. We talked about her new life as a single mom, about the challenges and triumphs of my first year as CEO. There were no empty pleasantries, no illusions of perfection. There was just a shared understanding of how fragile life was, and how resilient we had been forced to become. Later that evening, after Leo was asleep on the couch, Emily and I stood by the large window, looking out at the glittering city lights. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked quietly, "the way things were before?" I thought about the laughter, the feeling of absolute security, the perfect family photo from that last Thanksgiving. I missed the idea of it, I admitted. But it wasn't real, what we have now. This is real. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we stood there in comfortable silence. The road ahead was still uncertain for both of us, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like our own. We were not living in the shadow of a lie anymore. We were starting over from scratch, and this time we were building on a foundation of truth.